Let's convene this SES meeting. I want to thank everybody for being here. I kept trying to move it to try to accommodate everybody's schedule, and it was like herding cats trying to get everybody in the same room. But we really need to sit down and talk, and I apologize that I also made a commitment to someone who I cannot be late for. I have a 4 o'clock, so at 3:45 I'm going to have to stop so that I can make a 4 o'clock. It is a must. Okay, I know that we have an agenda, and I want to thank Gita for their report on the bond, the possible effect of the rating on the sales tax. I imagine everybody saw this morning's headline. So, why don't we start with a report from Revenue and Taxation on preparation for the sales tax? Turn on the mic, please.
We do have a draft proposal of the general sales tax rules and regulations. It's just basically based on the law that was passed, Public Law 34-87. So this is where we're at. We're just waiting for any other input that may happen. It definitely would change if anything is amended or added to the sales tax. So we have something here that is proposed. So
yeah, I really do think that you're going to have to finish it. That may sound strange with today's headline looking like there's going to be a repeal, but I think you don't do rev and tax or the sales tax provision justice if they can point to the fact that you guys aren't ready.
We do have a proposed. I can share it with you.
And so what else needs to be done to get ready?
Well, it's just a little bit, we have the rules and regulations ready for to go to the AAA, or actually to go through the process here to get it adopted, and then we're actually going to make minor changes to the BPT form to include the sales tax. That can basically happen in a few weeks. That's something that we're looking at, but I guess that's where we're at right now. We do have the proposed, so I can have it copied and you can take a look at it. It's just based basically on what the law was passed, with very few exemptions.
And as it relates to the BPT, has anybody done an analysis on what the potential revenue projection is for it for FY19, so we can include it in the budget? I need to know how much.
You're talking about the
if the 2% is allowed to survive and go into effect on October 1st.
Yeah,
how much will that generate?
We do basically have an estimation of what it generate. Basically, what we did was we basically looked at the FY 2016 reporting of the BPT and eliminated those that are exempted, which doesn't include insurance, all the others, the banks, and all the others. So we looked at that, and we came out roughly about $120 million. That's what we basically looked at. So it would basically apply to the wholesalers, retailers, service, part of the rental others, and basically that. So if you were to add that,
did you include sale of homes? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one that got letters from realtors that are wondering whether or not, besides paying the capital gains tax and the
Basically,
homeowner's going to have to pay also a sales tax for that 2%.
it would basically apply to tangible personal property. So basically, and service, and any service. So basically, those are the two application, with the exemption of what's exempted under the law, which is the insurance, the banks, the food stamps, and people that have contracts that were basically entered on before those things.
And are you reading tangible personal property to
I think that's
to
real.
exclude
Real property.
That's real.
Real
That's
property.
real
Yes.
property.
Real property.
Will they be? So the sale of those. How about the commissions for the realtors?
Commissions, if it's service, yes, because it defines any service. So if you're providing services. So I didn't bring the analysis with me, but I can certainly give it to you in a later time. But basically, we just went through all the different activities that would apply, and that's our estimate.
I think it would behoove you to transmit that formally to me as speaker,
Sure.
and I can disseminate it to the members so they can see, so that they can, when they get the, I mean, there's a whole group of realtors that have been writing to us. I don't think I'm the only one. No, there's been a group of realtors that are really hot on this idea and are pushing for the repeal because they believe that it includes them. Then I know that there are emails that are being received about the sales tax on automobiles, and I know that there's so you need to make that clear so that everybody understands out there what you guys are planning on doing. And I'm saying this list has to be to my office by close of business tomorrow at the latest, the opening of business on Monday morning, so that if I'm asked and it goes out there, then people have an understanding, especially before the next public hearing on the repeal. Because otherwise you're going to have a lot of people coming in and testifying about they want this exemption, they want that exemption, and all kinds of things. And so whatever you have as your rules, or as you see it, as you're interpreting the law as it was passed, get something out there that the members can point to, because otherwise it just makes a big gigantic target and everybody can attack it. Well, you're doing this to me, and I'm going to push against it. So has there been any effort? And you guys need to respond to senators. I think you saw in this morning's newspaper that one senator is voting yes on the repeal because, at least what is reported in the paper, is that he's written to you guys to ask you to get some information together. He was sponsoring the sales tax, one of the other bills, and was a supporter of the sales tax, was pushing it. And he needed information from you guys to assist him in justifying his bill. And he was getting no responses. He was hand-delivering it, supposedly, and getting nothing. And so now he's announced that he's going to vote for the override, for the repeal. So you guys aren't doing yourself any favors by not answering, especially the members, the senators, and Doris?
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Speaker, we continue to have that similar challenge when we go there. And part of it is the fact that a lot of their systems are still kind of manual. And so it is a laborious process in getting the data. That's why sometimes their audits take, quite long. And part of it is it does need to have as I've mentioned, a complete upgrade of their systems and for their systems to even talk to each other.
But at least even a courtesy response that says, I've received your letter, I'm looking into it, the amount of information you're requesting is going to take an additional week, but to just blow a senator off that way doesn't do you any good, And so I keep telling you guys are your own worst enemy. I told you guys when we discussed the draft that was coming out, you guys need to be ready to explain why things aren't happening.
Right, and I agree about responding to these questions, and I spoke to that senator the other day, and, I apologize, I wasn't aware of it, and he was supposed to send me that information, and I will look into it.
I'm just saying, he's
Yes, I
announced
know.
and it's in the papers.
We must be more responsive. True.
Because you're not winning friends here. It just, and every day, and
Yes, we'll get that information.
And I believe like what the public auditor said, some of these informations we just don't have. I mean, this is a new area of sales tax, and when you ask some informations, we only have BPT.
but then respond back and say that to
so-
them.
So,
Just don't ignore. All I'm saying, please don't ignore people, okay?
okay, I'll look into it, Mr. Speaker.
Because we're going to there's a push by at least 8 members to have a session this month to repeal the sales tax, which is completely throwing off all of our preparation for writing a budget. And we need to know exactly how many are going to vote for it, to know whether or not it's not going to be overridden, whether or not we're going to have, I'm sure in spite of the conflicting words that we're getting from Adelut, one wing says one thing, the other wing says another thing, and so you really, guys, you're not helping the cause. And the preparation for the budget is being held up because we don't know what our revenue is going to be, and as a consequence, don't know how much we can appropriate or how much we're going to need to cut. Okay. On this, anybody else want to talk about the sales tax? I can move on. Okay, the second thing is on the amnesty. Where are we with amnesty? I want to compliment you on the FAQ that was issued the other day. It was very thorough, and the extension of the date, but really seriously, I don't need to see that. That FAQ needs to be published somehow before the 19th so that everybody understands that I can or I cannot qualify, what I need to do, and the fact that there's only 10 days left, that I have to come up with my 10% and find somebody to give me the 90% by August 28th. So why don't you make a report on what's happening with the amnesty?
Well, the amnesty for the 2018 tax amnesty that we have here, does everybody, you can have a copy, Senator? As of, there's two categories that we have here. One is for the income tax and BPT, which is handled under the collection branch. As of June 6, 2018, we received about 497 applications with a total cumulative total tax due of 16 million. Of that, about 2.9 million has been paid. This is the 10% or more that's paid. And the balance that is due on or before August 6, which is basically the last day for the amnesty, is $13 million. We only have information on the real property up to June 4th, so 307 applications have been submitted. 496,000 plus has been paid, and has been identified as due, and 211,000 have been basically paid, which is 10% or more, with a balance of about $285,000. So roughly we collected of that 16.5, 3.2 million, with a balance collectible between now and August 6 of $3.3 million. So this basically is what we have so far. As you know, we started the amnesty on May 7, and it's supposed to end in May 29, and we extended it another 3 weeks, basically to end on June 19. So after June 19, then everything will be closed for the amnesty program, and then it all depends on how we're gonna, these people would have to come in and make good on their balances on or before August 6.
And this amount that you received, the 3 million that has been paid and the 13 that you hope to collect, for the total 16, is this being reported separately and segregated? I mean, it is an anomaly. It shouldn't appear on the CRER, should it? It should, under what?
It's
Under
cash.
what?
Yeah. Well, at the time, whenever it's paid, it should be recorded as cash coming in, because you're going to debit cash and credit something. But what will not show is the receivable, because the receivable, under the GASB rules, it's only receivables collected 90 days after year end that will be recorded. Okay, all of the receivables that DRT has on its books is strictly DRT's books, and it's not on DOA's books. DOA's books will only record receivables subsequently received 90 days after September 30th.
My question really was this revenue is just going to go into, as we discussed this morning, Mr. Byrne, into the general fund and can be used for everything in general operations?
Yes, but we certainly intend internally to keep a record of how much this is, because it's non-recurring revenue, and we don't want to use it to move to make any further projections.
But you will keep a separate, it'll be counted for separately, that these are amnesty funds, so that at the end of the year, when the audit is done, there would have been an item that said 16 million or 60 million was collected in amnesty.
That could be added.
Yes, we will identify it separately.
So I just want to make sure that it's completely separated. Did anybody else want to address the issue of amnesty? Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I guess just a quick question so that there's a good understanding of the individuals who have stepped forward and actually remitted partial payment or anticipate to pay the full amount. My question is, of those who have come forward, the 804, are there any individuals or businesses that have stepped forward that already had consummated a payment plan with Reverend Tax?
Yes, this applies to all taxpayers, whether they have a payment plan or not, or even if they're litigating it in court right now and decide to agree with the case, they can actually.
No, I understand that
Yeah,
part.
those
I mean,
things,
they can participate
Yeah,
in the
participate,
amnesty.
yeah. So anybody,
But
the
do
only
you know
thing,
how many may have been on a payment plan? Because
Oh.
I consider them good citizens or businesses trying to meet their tax obligations, as opposed to many of the other individuals and businesses that have yet to approach Reverend Tax. So do you know what that possible number may be?
we, no, right now, we can track on it and look at the taxpayers that are coming in and to see if they're under the payment plan, then we can get back to you if you want.
Yeah, if you can,
Yeah.
because that would be added information, Mr. Chairman, in terms of understanding who these individuals or businesses
Yeah,
are.
and I think if everybody reads yesterday's press release with the FAQs on the amnesty, it's very clear who is and isn't, that anybody who had failed in the past is not. People that are on payment plans now, they're going to have to continue their monthly payments between now and August on the payment plan that they have, but by August 28th have to pay off completely whatever is outstanding, rather than in 2024, they will pay it by August 28th of 2018. But as Senator Argan had asked, those people can also participate. So everybody, if everybody just reviews that, you'll see who exactly it is, and they've made it very clear who is and isn't going to be able to participate in this. Do you guys have any idea how many more people will be coming forward in the next 10 days?
It's very hard to predict, Mr. Speaker, but we anticipate more will be coming in. As far as number, I cannot answer that question because, they come in. I mean, we track it every day. So, we can give you a report on how many people come every day, but as far as the remaining days that are open to be part of the program, I can anticipate that there's going to be more, but the number, I don't know.
Well, I think we're scheduling another SDS meeting on the 21st. So by the 21st, I'd like to get an updated report on how
Sure.
many and how much was paid down, and how much
Yeah.
is going to be collected by August 28th.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, would it be prudent, I mean, I haven't seen any tax amnesty notification in the print media. The news media has been very supportive and very helpful in terms of disseminating the information. But if you're talking about a $2,000 or $5,000 investment versus any additional outstanding taxpayers that could literally step forward and say, okay, take a look at the print and say, I do qualify, so why didn't I go in before the deadline? Could that be possibly considered as an
Yeah,
option?
that's what I was telling them, that they need to buy a couple of ads between now and the 19th. Publish something, either get one of the papers to agree to print the FAQs with its answers, or to pay for an ad. I think even if $2,000 or a $3,000 payment by you guys to the newspaper to pay for this is well worth it. You've got to not be penny wise and pound foolish when you can possibly realize.
Also, in addition to what we did right before we opened the amnesty, we actually notified all taxpayers that actually owe the government. So they're well aware if they're in the. So the people that are not really aware the people that are really not aware are the non-filers. So we actually gave them a notice, an annual notice of how much is owed. So they're aware. Reminder notice.
Senator Espaldon, you were the one that was first to suggest this. Do you have any questions on the amnesty or any comments?
No, I'm just glad that they implemented it because there was some hesitancy from the start.
Yeah.
I do expect to see some of those numbers grow. We're hoping that, by the end of June 19th, that maybe we could look at that $20 million figure that we were all looking at. It's not bad. At 16 million, 16.5 million, we're just basically 3.5 million short of what we were expecting. So hopefully, I think the suggestion of the speaker, one more ad, just put it out there. Maybe we'll even surpass $20 million that we were hoping to
And a matter of
collect.
fact, all the big accounts that we actually issued were all certified. In other words, another thing that anything amount, big amounts, I think 100,000 or more, they were certified to make sure that taxpayers have received them. So those
Received
are
that
the,
notification.
yeah, received the notice.
Yeah, because I think
notification,
both Senator Espadon and I
Yeah, so-
were talking to accountants who were saying if you could push for this amnesty, a number of our clients would be willing to
And-
come forward if this was available. Okay.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, if I may, but one of the questions that's been hanging out there, and I've been receiving a lot of calls, we're addressing this, and of course, does this amnesty cover, everybody talks about that $100 million plus that's owed in taxes, right? This amnesty basically covers those taxpayers. So in essence, we're saying if we collect $20 million, that's 20% of the $100 million we're thinking about, right? So what happens to the rest? I know you've made some statements before, some of them are just uncollectible, whether they're dead or whether the corporation
Yeah,
whether they declare bankruptcy. Can you give us a little more light on that?
Yeah, I wish I had the breakdown, but the receivables are really broken. I think it's about $100 million that we're actively pushing, collection branches pushing to collect. We have some big cases in court right now. I think it amounts about $29 million. So those are like litigated, so it takes a while to be closed. So, but we've actually closed several cases recently. So, but they're not big amounts. But 29 million in court. Then you got offer and compromise, maybe a few $1 million that are on the works. People coming in and saying, I'm in a hardship, financial hardship. Drop to collectability or liability, and they make some offers. So we look into those things. So, and we have things that are in bankruptcy. I think there's quite a few million that are in bankruptcy. So, payment plans is another that we have. So, if you break that $160 million, it takes a while, but we're really out there aggressively collecting and informing taxpayers that, levies and liens, we're going to courts to file injunctions, to bring taxpayers in so they can actually take care of their taxes. So filing liens and levies, we do that a lot. So the good thing about this is that those people, that can afford to pay their taxes in full, and I guess the bargain is that we waive all the penalties and interest that they owe. This is something that people are coming in. So.
And just to confirm, the numbers that you have on this sheet, that you have like the collection branch, the total cumulative tax due, like the $16 million, that's pure tax. That's not including interest and penalties, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good enough. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, then you then.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just one additional question or comment, because obviously this has yet to be implemented, and it's a piece of legislation that was passed in the 28th Guam legislature, creating the Guam Territory Income Tax Attorney. And this office would be principally responsible for going after outstanding tax receivables. I know your tax collectors have the skills, have the ability, but with an attorney and the legal component added to it, there's really that added pressure in terms of our outstanding taxpayers actually meeting their obligation. So can I just ask, not why it hasn't been implemented, but how can this be implemented so that in fact it's an additional tool that Revenue Tax has to be able to go out and collect taxes?
First thing, we've been trying very hard to try and get somebody to come and work for our department. We had several of those RFPs out, but I believe it's the the salary maybe is one thing that we really need to look at, because if you want to bring somebody in, you know, and that's the only reason why right now we're only working with the AG's office to represent, you know, the government on tax cases. So it's not that we haven't tried, we've been trying, Senator, try to get, you know, a legal, an attorney to work for a department, but we even had the funding, but there's no takers. So that's something we tried to recruit off island several times. During the times when Steve Cohen was here, you know, we were really well represented because he was there at all times, you know, representing our cases in court. But you know, there's things that we want to do, but we're working with the AG's office to see if we can work something. But I think there's some issues that we need to actually work on, because there's really no law that provides contingency. In other words, I think.
Then do you have any documentation that shows that in fact you did try to
Sure.
hire an attorney? And what this attorney, by the way, is an office of the Principal Guam Territorial Income Tax Attorney. So this is a specialized division specifically tasked and given additional authority to go after outstanding tax receivables. So it's not a matter of hiring an attorney or getting additional legal support from the Attorney General's office. It's hiring this attorney and the additional support personnel to be able to actively go after outstanding tax receivables. Because in February, when it was stated during the discussion of the financial crisis that there was in excess of about $180 million in outstanding tax receivables, that caught us all by surprise. So having a tool like this for Revenue Tax to be able to utilize the legal arm of the government to effectively go out and collect outstanding tax receivables, I know is only an added tool that would benefit the agency and benefit the government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thanks. Can I just respond real quick? Because I'm so glad you brought that up. We've been discussing that with the Attorney General, and they've also put out an RFP for some attorneys for Revenue Tax. You know, with all these ongoing tax cases, but unfortunately there was only one interest, and I believe he didn't have the qualifications, so they couldn't even pick him up. So if we can do something about the pay.
But please take a look at Public Law 28
Yes.
is 175.
Yes.
Because with that specialized authority, I'm sure members of this body can look at assisting
Adjusting the pay.
in terms of the financial compensation
Okay,
package.
great. Thank
Because if it's going to result in collecting outstanding tax receivables in the millions, then it would be worth the investment. Thank you.
Thank you. I neglected at the very beginning to thank a member of our SES. This is her last meeting with us. She is resigning officially tomorrow. And I want to, well, after she speaks, we can thank her then. But this week, you just issued the health insurance audit. I'd like for you to explain to the members a couple of your findings, because this amnesty, that money is going to be utilized to pay for everything this fiscal year. That's not going to be is not going to survive into the next fiscal year. With $96 million in tax refunds due between now and September, Senator Espaldon is going to be very busy jumping in front of the train trying to stop this special funds raiding. Because you're going to get to all reds in September, and all this, everything's going to be taken to pay things in September. Everything's going to be red. So we need to try to figure out how to bring down the cost. And so with that introduction, I'd like our retiring or resigning, our incumbent who's going to be leaving us, to please discuss that audit that her office prepared and the recommendations that she makes in that audit for our consideration and for us to discuss even more on the 21st. But we need to, I know that they don't agree at that corner of the table on a couple of the things, but the thing is that we need to hear from you on.
Thank you, Mrs. Speaker. So before I get into that, and I do apologize, I didn't bring that audit with me. I meant to, and I forgot, so I'm just going to go from oh, okay. You could brought it. Okay. But before I do that, I just wanted to clarify something in the discussion with the accounts receivable, the taxes, and especially Senator Espaldón, as well as Senator Uggan. Those accounts receivable are not on the books of Department of Administration. Okay. And they never will be on the books of Department of Administration. Okay, those are on the books and in the internal systems of Department of Revenue and Taxation. And under the accounting principles, okay, because again, you were talking about collectability. He talked about collectability of those. The certainty of the collectability is unknown. And therefore, that's the primary reason why they're not on the books. Because if they were on the books, you would have to almost fully reserve them because of the uncertainty of the collectability of those receivables. So that's the reason for that. So I just wanted to emphasize, so as he negotiates and as they're paid in, that's when it becomes revenue into the government of Guam. And that's when Department of Administration will record it at that time. So let's be clear. The extent, how much, how old they are, all of that stuff, that's Department of Revenue and Taxation's books. Okay. Now, with respect to the audit that we did, and that kind of came about for concern about the cost of GovGuam, how much GovGuam has been paying. And as we've seen, you know, for the last 3 to 4 years, that number has continued to escalate, although there was a little bit compared to from 16 to 17, but from 14, 15, and 16, it, you know, it was going up almost by about almost $10 million per year. What we found overall, because of the separation of active from retirees, the actives are bearing a much lower share proportionally to the amount of claims that being paid in, whereas the retirees are, while they are high utilizers, the amount of premiums charged to the retirees is far in excess of what they're utilizing. Okay. In other words, retirees' premiums compared to their claims is almost 3,000 plus overall disproportionate, whereas active, their premiums to their claims, they are in a deficit to the tune of about just under $500. So it is disproportionate. And as a result of that, the general fund is also paying a disproportionately higher share for retirees because the general fund pays for the retiree health insurance of course, the general fund, Department of Education, University of Guam, GCC, the hospital. So it's, and so by pooling, and that was the fundamental area, the pooling of all of this would result, yes, in a slightly higher cost to the government, okay, in a slightly higher cost, but overall would save the cost of the government to retirees. And so that was in our discussion with Ed, and he pretty much agreed that the pooling is likely to happen. Am I?
Yes, so far we haven't disagreed with.
Now the area, what we're seeing, okay, and again, it's capacity building. Does Department of Administration have the capacity to monitor? And actually, it hasn't been monitoring all the claims. And in fact, your staff, Mr. Speaker, have far better analysis of the types of claims and so on than Department of Administration because, you know, there's just a limited number and the kinds of claims, the analysis, you know, what we wanted to do later on was look at which are the highest claims, how many people, there's all kinds of work that could be done from an analytical point of view, but unfortunately, that type of work is not being done at all. Now, there was the potential that there might be $5 million in claims, but one of the discussions we had was because the definition, right? Finding the definition, was that a correct interpretation? And so all we just asked them to do was to go back and look at it and see, make one last effort to see whether or not it can or cannot be, and then if it isn't, then we just don't collect it. There was the possibility that there might be $5 million in claims. We compared what GovGuam is paying also to the federal government, also to the court, and again, GovGuam is paying a disproportionately higher share. We did do some numbers also in here. If we were to shift the burden, from approximately 80%, down to, for every $5 million an amount, and that would mean approximately a $59 increase to an employee, or about $600 over a year, depending on the class that person is in. And that we have a very detailed schedule because we use the existing rates to show for every 5% shift, that would be a $5 million savings to the government of Guam. So again, and not materially increase to the employees. Again, it's a matter of who should pay more. We also compared to the U.S. The good news for GovGuam and Guam in general is the premiums here are still much lower than they are back in the States. That's the good news. Contrary, though, GovGuam is paying proportionally more percentage-wise than what is being paid in the States. So, with what we were recommending is that it be pooled and have one class, because the larger the class that you have, that's why you have a pool. So high users are offset by low-end users. That's the whole reason for having a class. When you have a class that's all high users, naturally the premium is going to be high for that class that is all high-end users. So in some, excuse me, the other thing that we found, and I know you mentioned it, excuse me, legislation was passed to have the exclusive contract. We did not verify, and we could not verify the efficacy of that number, okay? And there was only one vendor, excuse me. There was only one vendor that submitted information. So we did not even go there. And I know that number has been floating around, but to determine if that is a true savings number, okay, we could not determine that.
Just so it's clear to the public, that quote-unquote savings was not something that I or my office calculated.
No, I understand.
It was the negotiating team that submitted that report to the Lieutenant Governor when they transmitted the proposal for every fiscal year, saying this is the potential savings between the two. The number was administration's numbers. It was not any number that I or my office or the legislature wrote.
What we found was that it was only one subscriber of the 3 subscribers that submitted that number. That's where I'm coming from. It was one subscriber that submitted that number, not the additional subscribers.
I understand, but the savings that I've been talking about was the savings, the negotiating team memo to the governor that he signs off on, is the number that that I was discussing. I don't know what you're talking about of just one carrier submitting. This was the negotiating team's number, not my number.
Yeah.
Please,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
everybody understands that the savings that I'm talking about is the savings that they
Yes.
claim themselves, not I.
Correct. That's correct. And then the other thing that we found is that the lowest cost subscriber was not the subscriber of choice. People have the largest subscriber A, has just about 80% of the entire subscribers, okay? They went from 90 plus down to 80%, and some of the other lower subscribers are starting to pick up, but still the vast majority of the people, of the GovGuam people, go not to the lowest cost subscriber. And that was one of the cautions that we said, because this might cause angst among people if they have to switch their doctor, and when they've been going so long to this particular doctor, and then now all of a sudden they can't go to this doctor and they're going to question why. So that was kind of like another cautionary thing that we wanted to impart, because the lowest cost is not necessarily the subscriber of choice.
But in your report, you make a comparison of the contribution rates, contribution by the federal government for local Guam employees, the federal government, the states and the judiciary and us. Did you do a comparison of how many does the federal government give their employees choice? Does the private sector give their employees choice? Does the judiciary give their employees choice?
No.
So I want that on the record.
Yes, no
that-
choice. You're correct. That is correct. There is no choice.
Mrs. Brooks, when you talk about pooling, what is the ratio of retirees to active GovGuam? And just an understanding what the averaging will do and how it'll help that situation.
On average, for example, in 2017, which is the latest year, there were 12,327 subscribers. Of that amount, 8,273 were active and 4,000. So it's about 1/3, 2/3. Okay, 1/3, 2/3. But the 1/3 is paying far more, and going back to the claims, the costs, the premiums charged is like 11,000 plus compared to their claims, resulting in a surplus of about 3,000 compared to actives who are being charged about $4,000 and their claims about 4,500. So that's the difference. Okay, let me give you an example. Our latest number is 2016, not 2017, because that So for actives. With an enrollment count of 8,200 plus, okay, their total claims was $42 million. $42 million for 8,000 employees, compared to almost $30 million for just under 3,900 retirees. Okay, so their claim, the active employee is using about $4,800 of claims, the active, whereas the retiree is using about $7,200 in claims. In other words, retirees, because by nature of them being older, utilize it more. So the average retiree claim was $7,200 compared to the average active employee of $4,800. But disproportionately, because they're paying in over $11,000 per total premiums, what the government is charging as well as what the employee is paying. They have a surplus of about $3,500 in what they pay in excess of the premiums charged to them compared to the active employees. And let me just give you that number. Wait, I forgot.
While you're looking for that, Mr. House.
Yeah, at the end of the story on that, you made a suggestion that there was some 100 million in federal funds available for medical care. My concern is that the local government make sure that we have the matching funds available. So otherwise, people with no funds go to the hospital and we're stuck with a $50 million bill that somehow we have to pay for. If we can come up with a $25 matching and have the federal government match the rest of it, then half of that liability would be paid for by the federal government. So I'd like you to elaborate more on, are we using the available federal matching, or is the local matching going to
No.
allow us to get the money? And
No.
what do we need to do to get that?
Well, right now, the last time, and Ms. Tess Archangel has more of that information, we still have, from the Affordable Care Act, approximately about $125 million or thereabouts in potential Medicare matching, okay? The good news, it went up from 50-50 to 55-45.
And I think his question is the editorial that was in one of the papers I think it was yesterday, that talked about the fact that if GovGuam could reduce its share of the employees' premiums,
The money could be freed up.
That $20 million for every $5 million that every 5% we reduce it, we have a savings of $5 million. If we reduced it by 25%, that $25 million could be used to match the $100 million
Yes.
to get you the additional amount that
Yes.
would then take care of the public as opposed to just us.
Yes, yes. Going back, retirees on average, the total premiums the government of Guam is paying for retirees is about $11,500, okay, compared to the $7,200 or thereabouts that they're claiming, compared to the active employees when we're paying about $4,500 for active employees, but their claims is around $4,800. So there's a net deficit, and that deficit is being financed by the retirees at a greater cost.
Yeah, just to encapsulate it, I want to make sure that in the budgeting process, there's sufficient funds, matching funds available. So if we're stuck paying $50 million for the hospital through appropriations or bonds, that instead of giving the hospital $50 million, that we make the 50 or half of that available as matching funds and get the other half paid for by the federal government to get the maximum federal government before it expires, or federal
And
funds
the
flowing
legislature
into the
has been
economy.
trying to do that in our farm fund. That's exactly it, is that we're using, rather than a direct subsidy to the hospital, it's sent to Public Health and Social Services to match the 3 M's. So that we're trying. But my concern is for the upcoming budget is we still haven't filled in that hole.
But let me just comment, when we talk about Medicare and the payment on Medicare, it isn't 100% to GMH because there are a lot of other subscribers, and I forgot what the percentage is, but GMH does not get the lion's share of the Medicare dollars. There's many other clinics who are providing, well, Medicare, and then, but it does get the lion's share of Medicaid, yes, because Medicaid is, you want to go ahead and clarify that?
Yeah, could I just clarify? Medicare is federal, federal money. I think you're talking about Medicaid.
No, this is Medicare dollars. This is the Medicare dollars. This is still the leftover from public health. Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Well, Madam Auditor, we want to thank you for 18 years of service to us in this position. As you stated we've been together for 41 years, 43 years together, dear.
When we started out, I was in my late 20s when we both started out together, and here we are. Still
We won't talk about how you are at this point. Shut up at that end. So anyway, no, really seriously, thank you very much for your service, and sad to see you go, but we need. I thank you for the last 3 reports, audits especially that you've done. When I requested them, I didn't realize it was going to be the cause to undermine my efforts to try to get us more money because it's showing that there are other problems. But it shows that there's got to be something. At the next meeting, I want to report from your fiscal strike force or whatever. Okay? Besides the amount of amnesty, I need a follow-up on how you guys are going to deal with this, because if we don't hear good news from the fiscal strike force, there really will be 10, maybe 11 and 12 and maybe 13 votes for the repeal. If you guys show that you're trying to do something and you're collecting, there may be, if it's 9, then there's a possibility that it might still survive. But if you don't, give us a good report of the next SES, because session's not going to be until after the 21st. You guys had better get your act together to do everything you can to make sure that you have a good report. You're ready with the sales tax. You're ready with your collections. You're showing that you're going to collect most of that $100 million because of this amnesty program. Then maybe some people might be able to reconsider. But right now, you're losing support. But anyway, I digress. Again, we really want to thank you and allow.
May I speak on those audits too, just for clarity? On the real property tax audit, okay, the number of 40 million that we talked about, approximately half of that is in the collection area that DRT has to work on. The other half is due to what we call foregone revenues. Foregone revenues in that we've given it away through the senior citizens tax exemption, we've given it away from the homeowners tax exemption. So if you were to just take care of those and get rid of those exemptions, okay, that would bring in approximately $20 million next year, meaning because that would have to be effective, you would need legislation now in order to effectuate the change in for the next real property tax bill. But so of the 40 million, approximately half is under the jurisdiction in the collection efforts area. And we mentioned areas, things like the John Does and the PIN numbers, okay, still have to be corrected. And so that's still going to be a longer, laborious process, whereas the other half are the exemptions. And the other thing, Mr. Speaker, if I may, and I did bring my other auditors, at the last SES meeting, you mentioned, let's look at more, what other exemptions do we have that we can do? And we were starting a gaming audit, and after your meeting, we sat down and we redirected the objective of that gaming audit. And I'd like to bring Clarissa and actually Yuka up here to talk about it, because in the way gaming is done, okay, The form that Revenue and Taxation puts out doesn't even show gross gaming. It's gross gaming, less payouts is net. And all that is shown is net. Okay, we had no idea how much is the gross. And what the gaming tax is being paid on is on the net, not on the gross. And so preliminary, we tried, my people tried to work on that number, and we could not. So what we did was we went to the top 5 nonprofit organizations that are doing gaming. And to our surprise, the loss foregone revenue. Gaming in Guam is big business, okay? We're averaging, for the last 4 years, okay, these numbers are still preliminary, but for the last 4 years, over $80 million in gaming, gross gaming revenue among just the top 5 gaming institutions here on Guam. So the payouts in this 4-year period was over $66 million, okay? So we got taxed, the gaming tax was only assessed on the net, or approximately $15 million. So we lost, the government of Guam lost by not taxing it at the gross level, but instead taxing it net of payouts. We lost $2.6 million in that. And we couldn't even determine the revenue. We had to go directly to each one of the 5 major items, major nonprofits, and ask them for all their information and compile it, because the form that DRT shows, unlike the BPT, which shows gross, exemption, subject, right? It doesn't show that. It just says net, okay? And that's what they paid out. So there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity to apply the gaming tax to gross, because remember, it's gross payouts and then you tax. And people who go to gaming are not going to miss the 4% that's being applied.
Can you redefine exactly what gaming is on Guam? Exactly what establishments generate $80 million annually? Because I'm a bit
Talk more.
surprised by that number.
Again, it involves, those machines that were allowed by law. It involves bingo, fundraisers.
No, but you're talking about non-profit.
Yeah.
The game room is not a non-profit.
Yeah, this is
No, but
primarily
it's part of it.
bingo.
Yeah, it's the
This
bingo.
is primarily bingo.
Just to clarify, so that's nonprofit gaming, primarily bingo.
Yes, this is nonprofit. This
And-
audit is focusing on nonprofits.
Right. And the reason why only net is being taxed is because of the law? The law says
No.
net only, or it's
Our-
because of a DRT form?
That's the DRT form. That's our interpretation.
The regulation in Title III of GAR, it says that the gross receipts is less payouts, and so that's why it's being taxed on less payouts.
Gross receipts, less payouts.
All right.
So if it was on gross,
Yes.
that's an opportunity, an additional $500,000 to $600,000 a year from the gaming tax. And the gaming tax goes to GMH, DOE, DPR. There's a formula
All right.
of where it goes to.
Is the GAR consistent with the law, the code?
Because the code only says gross receipts, so it doesn't really define it, and the definition is specifically for GAR.
Okay, all right, thank you. Wait, turn it on.
This is a limited gaming tax. It's not gross receipts. It's limited gaming tax.
What do you mean limited gaming versus non-profit? Bingo is not a game room. It's
That's,
right.
It's been taxed.
it's not under the BPT.
No.
It's a-
It's a different,
it's a
because
special
if it's
code
under
section.
BPT, they won't be taxed because they're exempted by law.
Okay. Because they're a nonprofit. Okay. All right, so next we're going to move up to revenue enhancements, draft legislation. EBMR?
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to note that our acting director, Lester Carlson, transmitted 3 pieces of draft legislation to Office of Finance and Budget. I believe the copies were circulated to everyone, as well as the summary of the projected revenues, which is really a one-pager. So the overall goal here with those 3 pieces of legislation is to increase revenues so that they can be deposited into what's being called a GMHA stabilization fund. Okay, and so one of the legislation is to assessing a departure facility surcharge to consumers utilizing rental vehicles on Guam's highways. The surcharge would be collected at the point of rental and shall be deposited into the fund that I just mentioned. And based on our estimates and using some assumptions, the projected revenue for 1 year will yield approximately 1.8 million to around 2.7 million. And that's, again, the assumptions here are a base of 1,000 rent-a-cars at a rate of 50 to 75% utilization rate and a 10% surcharge per day. So the calculations are right below that, and again, it's the yield is around 1.8 to 2.7 million. Going on to the next legislation, that is essentially to increase the hotel occupancy tax from 11% to 15%. And again, the idea there is that the proceeds would go into the GMHA stabilization fund. The projected revenue there of 2.87 million for FY18 and 14.5 million for FY19 was actually based on the projections that OFB provided back at the February SES meeting. Okay, so
This is straight from their projections of...
That's correct.
Of the totals or of visitor arrivals or what?
No, this is based on the increase of the rate from 11% to 15%, and I guess based on trends for the remainder of this fiscal year. And again, the assumption is the implementation of July 1st. Okay, so the FY18 amount there of 2.8 is really assuming that we'll start to see the collections in August and September. So that's really just for the remaining 2 months, and then the FY19 number is for the full 12 months. Okay, and the last one is actually, it's really nominal in terms of our projected revenue. At first, when we first broached the topic of this particular revenue source, we were using basically the sum of the registration fee plus 2 other fees that were included in the registration cost, which is the recycling revolving fund and the streetlight fund. So really, if you net that out and you're only going to double the registration renewal fee, it comes up to a rough estimate of about $38,000 per year. And we did go ahead and note at the bottom there that if we were to use the sum of all 3 amounts that are typically charged for the registration, then the projected amount of collections would be closer to about $100,000. Okay.
Are there any questions or comments, Senator San Augustine?
I just got a simple question. You're talking about the increased hotel occupancy, correct?
Yes,
that's something
that's correct.
GVB is supporting? Because I know I've been reaching out to them about an increase of the fees.
Yeah, there have been throughout the course of the past several months, there have been different options that have been put on the table in terms of trying to make up the gap between the Tax Cut and Jobs Act and being able to survive for the rest of the fiscal year. So one of them was the proposal to increase the hotel occupancy tax by the 4%. That was part of the one of the scenarios that was proffered by OFB.
And that was supposed to bring in 6 points, was that? I'm looking at your page 3. Is that what was the amount that you were supposed to be bringing in when you jumped from 11 to 15?
We're looking at 2.87, close to 3 million for the rest of this fiscal year, assuming that that it's implemented on July 1st.
Okay. And for the year, you would bring in?
For one full year, it would be about 14.5 million.
Okay. All right. I don't hear any objection from GVB, then I guess it's open season.
All right. All right. These are the same recommendations that were made before with just more detail?
That's correct. Yes.
Right. So there's no-
Actually, a lot of these three proposals were part of the amended FRP legislation.
Yes.
In terms of the various options that are out there.
All right. So, all right. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll move up to Financial Management System Department of the Interior Office of Insular Affairs Funding Update, Department of Admin. Mr. Byrne?
Madam Vice Speaker, we provided a report on two funding sources that we've got from DOI, roughly a $250,000 each. One of them is to update and institute a electronic document processing system to replace our manual hard copy system, which I'm really very keen on. I mean, I'm really keen on paperless processing. It saves paper and it speeds up the processing. The other project is $248,000 to fund a improved fixed asset system, which, although not manual, is fairly laborious at the moment. And in particular, the issue is extracting information from the main system and classifying it as either construction in process or a finished asset. The finished asset part is easy. The construction in process part is less easy and is one of the last things to be done during the course of our annual audit. So I look forward to being able to progress that too.
All right. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes. Ms. Brooks? Yes.
That's one of the reasons why the current FY 2017 audit is being delayed, because there's still, as he mentioned, it's very laborious. It's been taking some time. Last year we were able to issue the audit by the first week of June, right? Now we're looking at by June 30th. So, and the delay in giving you folks the audit also hampers your projections for future revenues. So, but that is another. Assets are a big area, and if they were able to get those systems, we could hopefully get the audits out sooner rather than later.
You may be sure we're pressing to get this out as quickly as possible, and I'm hopeful of getting it sometime next week. I was pressing the auditors yesterday.
Wonderful. Okay. If no other questions, then we'll move to GVB, the visitor arrivals update, please. Mr. Munya?
Thank you very much. Just on your handouts here, I did provide some slides that show some of our visitor arrival updates. We did get off to a slow start this year because of North Korea. However, that we are doing a lot better than we were at the beginning of the fiscal year. We projected around September, end of September last year, to end the fiscal year 2018 with a minus 10% compared to 2017. Since then, we have updated our projections. We are now minus 3.7% compared to the same period last year, or looking at ending this fiscal year minus 3.7% versus the minus 10% that we initially projected. So we're doing a lot better. If you take a look on the second page for the month to date, from May 1 to the 31st, we welcomed 112 visitors, 112,000 visitors to Guam, a minus 3.4% compared to this May of 2017. And then if you take a look at the next page, calendar year to date, we are still on track right now, tracking calendar year to date minus 3.5, and then the fiscal year to date is minus 3.6. So we are on track to be around that minus 3.6 for the fiscal year, and minus 3.6, minus 3.7. If you take a look on the next page, at our budget hearing last week, we did project for FY 2019 1.53 million visitors for the fiscal year. With the news of Jeju Air coming in and starting operations between Osaka and Guam, we have adjusted that projection, and now the new projection for FY19 stands at 1.57 million. If we meet that projection, which we are confident we will, then it will be the most we've ever had in arrivals to Guam. So we're pretty confident about that.
And is that set, the new Osaka, Guam?
Yes,
That's set.
They have already announced that.
All right. Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Munya. We're going to move up to the update on the Government of Guam Bond Credit Watch status by Gita. Is Gita here? All right. I think we've been provided some information in our packets, and so we'll move on. We'll table that till the next meeting. The status of income tax refund repayments by the Department of Administration and the Department of Revenue and Taxation. Mr. Byrne?
The total that we've paid out to date in respect to this year is about 44 million. The bulk of that was paid in March. I think it was the total in March was about 33 million, and we've managed roughly 2 million a week since then. As you heard this morning, receipts this week are not as great as we had hoped, so we are still working on whether we can make any further payments in the near future.
What period are we up to now?
We're...
Please.
Basically, we're paying up, I think the last one we paid up basically was covered part of February 5th. So I guess just to give you an idea, we have about $15 million A status so far right now that we processed all the way up to February 9. So those are the pending refunds to be paid out.
How does this compare to your projections of estimated tax liability that we used in the FY18 budget?
Well, I think we're on track. I know Burns is looking at the net after offsets, but when we look, talk about gross, we generally pay gross refunds in 145 million on a fiscal year. Then you take out all those offsets that that goes to all the different like JMATs and accounts receivables and other offsets that apply. But I guess we're, I was surprised when the speaker mentioned that there's about 95 million left, which is about right. 95 million left on gross for refund, because we're about 51 million on gross that we paid up. So I guess the speaker was already taking his notes earlier.
All right, thank you. Any questions for DRT or DOE? All right, then we're going to move on to the April 2018 Special Revenue Funds Tracking Report, BBMR. Mr. Mariano.
Thank you. Both the CRER and Special Funds Tracking Report for the month of April they were both transmitted to the legislature on May 21st. Starting first with the Special Funds Tracking Report. Again, these are just for the key funds that compose that are summarized on the report itself. For the Guam Highway Fund, sir, seems like there's feedback or something. Anyway.
I think those are the church bells.
Oh, okay. The Guam Highway Fund, based on 7 months actual and 5 months projected, is where we're looking at a total of $21,078,432, or approximately $58,000 less than the adopted level of $21.1 million. The Solid Waste Operations Fund is tracking at $19.2 million, or about $200,000 less than the adopted level of $19.4. The TEF, Territorial Education Facility Fund, is tracking at $31.7 million, or $2.4 million above the adopted level of $29.2. The Tourist Attraction Fund is tracking at $42.1 million, or approximately $2.4 million less than the adopted level of $44.6. With the Healthy Futures Fund, we're tracking at $28.4 million, or about $500,000 over the adopted level of $27.8 million. And for the Customs and Quarantine Inspection Services Fund, we're looking at approximately $14 million, or close to $900,000 below the adopted level of $14.9. And just to note, the reports for the month ending May will be transmitted by June 20th of this month, or the 20th of the month.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right. The last item looks like the consolidated, April 2018 Consolidated Revenue and Expenditure Report from BBMR, DOA, DRT.
Okay,
Mr.
yeah,
Mariano?
I guess I'll just go and present that as well. Yeah. Again, the report was transmitted on the 21st of the month. Bottom line total, we're tracking at $817,354,287 dollars, or approximately $32.8 million less than the adopted gross revenue, general fund revenue of $849.7 million. I'll just list some of the totals by tax category. For total income taxes, we're tracking at $458.2 million as compared to the adopted level of $512.1. So with respect to income tax collections, were approximately $53.8 million less than the adopted level. And of course, a lot of that is primarily due to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Okay, going on to BPT, we're tracking at $27.4 million, or $12.3 million above the adopted level of $259.1 million. And again, that can be attributed to the recent implementation of the 1% BPT, which is factored into our projection. Going on to total license fees and permits, we're tracking at $7.1 million, or approximately $1 million over the adopted level of 6.0. For total use of money and property, we're actually tracking at a negative $500,000, or negative $519,413, which now brings the projected shortfall to about $912,000. For Section 30, we received $77.7 million, or $9.1 million over the adopted level of 68.6. Going down to immigration fees, we're tracking at 1.9, or approximately $132,000 over the adopted level of 1.8 million. And department charges are tracking $302,000 below the adopted level of 1.5 million, and it's at 1.2 million currently, or based on our April tracking. Okay.
Any questions? And Mr. Hernandez.
Yeah, the speaker is not here, but I know he was going to ask just to clarify in terms of individual income tax projections, if that includes the additional child tax credit as a revenue item?
Well, to answer your question, yes, it does. And that amount is at 19.2 million. And although it's not factored into the baseline tracking, it is factored in as a, we're calling it supplemental revenues. And, I know that there's been some disagreement about how that's posted or it's recognized, but currently the administration has taken the position that it'll be reflected in the income tax revenue level.
Ms. Brooks.
Mr. Mariano, if you don't mind, if we could just go back to the income tax tracking versus the revenue tracking. And I just wanted to bring to the attention of the senators. This has been the challenge for GovGuam, certainly in the last 3 fiscal years and even in the current fiscal year, where our projections have been much, how shall I say, rosier than expected, and then we budget to that rosier number, and that's how we've been, how we get the deficit, because the expenditures are not adjusted to come in line with the overly optimistic revenues. And here you see now, for example, $53 million. That's quite significant. In the last 3 fiscal years per the audit, okay, our revenue projections overall have been anywhere around $20 million more. In other words, actual revenues came down, did not meet expectations on average by about $20 million. So, and this is showing overall. The bright spots are Section 30. That certainly is the bright spot. And then, of course, BPT has always been kind of an anomaly for me, the way, and maybe that is due to the increase in the BPT. That seems rather high, overall, because we only had 1 month. So again, I don't know. But when you think about it overall, in this year's, just year to date for 2018, okay, just year to date in 2018, from the tracking, we're down $32 million. So if that's where what happens with BVMR, what happens with the cash is come year end, there's no more cash, and everyone gets squeezed out. So I just a word of caution that in the last 3 years, our revenue projections have been more optimistic than the reality of it, and averaging around 20 million for the last 3 years.
Any questions?
Just to be
Senator
clear, Madam Public Auditor, at $20 million, and again, that's a significant amount, for the whole year, correct. That basically, I'm trying to do the math in my head, provides basically a margin of error of about 2 or 3%. It's much greater than that, because if the budget is about, what, 800? Right. And just to, again, put on the record, and I think we all know it, that the budget proposal submitted by the administration was much higher than what we actually passed. We did reduce that budget, and we're still coming over. We're over projecting, and on the average about $20 million. But again, there is that margin of error. If you're taking $20 million against $800, $900 million, then I would believe that would probably be within an acceptable margin. Is that safe to say? I mean, 20 million is 20 million, but again, this is not an exact science.
I think OFMB does probably a better job of doing that. We haven't spent a lot of time in analyzing the reasons for the overprojections. We do know, for example, withholding, okay, if we look at year-to-date, it's already $49 million. We knew that withholding was going to suffer, but I think part of the reason why there's a big portion is because the calculation in the first place was already optimistic to begin with. But then the good news is the individual income tax. That's where people pay their quarterlies and the additional tax. If we had to say, if we offset those two, and I don't, like I said, I don't get involved in the projections, but if we offset those two, the withholding is still about $20 million overly optimistic, all right? So part of this, why is there such a big change, okay? It's more than 10%, okay? It's more than 10%. It's a combination of two factors. The overly optimistic number that was adopted already last year, right? And we're showing just from that number alone, for the last 3 years, we've been overestimating, over-optimistic to the tune of about 20 million. Then on top of that, the Trump tax cut hit us with the withholding being lower starting in January, February. Yeah. So we got a double whammy this year, an overly optimistic income tax projection coupled with the Trump tax cut. So that's why you have a $53 million over in income tax alone. You did make some offsets on BPT, you know, but I thought we're going to get $12 million. I thought we're going to get 30. The estimate for the remaining 6 months was about 30 million. So we've already got 12 to date. So there's something else going on in here. You follow where I'm coming from?
Yes, and in fact, I wanted to make note of that also, because one of the questions that I remember that we did ask on the floor was whether there was whether it was factored in of, since the residents now have more disposable income, that they would then be spending it into the economy, and that might account for a higher BPT income coming in. So yeah, I don't believe that $12 million is solely because of the increase in BPT. It might be because of people who are now have a little bit more money in their pocket are now spending it, you know, whether it's for pizzas or whether it's for clothes or whatever it may be. And again, I think that was one of the factors that we were hoping would be factored in so that we can get a truer picture of, you know, what the discrepancy would be. You know, even though we might see lower collections in income taxes, but again, we need to be able to project of what that means in terms of the multiplier effect if that money is spent into the economy. So I just want to make note of that. But thank you for that explanation, though, Madam Public Auditor.
Right. The Director of OFB.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, at least in terms of the adopted revenues. I know for FY18 this year, we took a look at for the projection of those revenues, especially for individual income taxes. We took a look at the audits for those prior years before 18, for 16, 15, and I think 14, and we noticed that for each of those years we have an average of 20 to 25 million over projected. And so for FY18, we took a deep look at it, and in the FY16 audit, it reflected that the ACTC, or the actual payments of refunds is about 140 to 145 million, and that's offset by ACTC. And in previous projections, those ACTC amounts were included in individual, but in FY18 we changed that, and that's why it's reduced to 78 million, when in fact it would have probably been 98. And so I think in that respect, for adopted revenues, for individual income taxes, that's why Speaker posed the question. We clarified it in the FY18 budget. In the FY19 budget, I assume we will do the same and not include that as revenue, because I know in the audit it doesn't include it as revenue. It includes it as an offset to the payment of refunds. When it comes to the withholding, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we've seen collections reduce on the withholding side, especially beginning in April, to the tune of what we had projected, which was around 18 to 20%. And so for withholding, it's an immediate cash impact reduction to the collections. And so I think when we look at the favorable or increase, decrease on these CRERs, especially the revenue portions under income taxes, when it comes to corporate and withholding, I assume that that's mostly withholding. That's a direct impact from Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And so I just wanted to provide that clarification.
And while the audit is still not finalized for FY 2017, we already see that the trend is following again, where the revenues adopted were significantly higher, almost similar to in the past prior years. We're almost significantly higher than the actual revenues coming in to date. But due to the good cash management that DOA and the governor implemented, this will be the first time there will be a significant surplus, and not due to bond financing, but really just due more to aligning expenditures with revenues. So this will be the first time, and unfortunately I'm not going to be there to tout it, okay, but this will be the first time the general fund will close the fiscal year end of 2017 with a surplus, as the governor has mentioned, and I'm not going to go into the details, a surplus that was not due to bond financing. This was a true surplus. But the bad news is we still have a cumulative deficit. Okay, we still have a cumulative deficit of upwards of anywhere from 80 to 100, 80 or so million, and that's why GovGuam continues to always be strapped for cash, because that deficit, and remember it was prior to, was about 100 million as of FY 2016, that deficit has not been wiped out. And that's why GovGuam will continue to always struggle to make its obligations.
All right, if I could just clarify, Mr. Hernandez from OFB, that the predictions that OFB had made in one of the earlier SES meetings as to the impact on withholding taxes from the Trump tax reform, that those are, what we're seeing now reflects your predictions closely?
I would say specifically for withholding taxes.
Yes.
It's on a month-to-month basis based on the projection. It looks close. For individual and corporate, there was, I would say, about 12 million in corporate tax collections that were over what we had projected. And I'm not sure exactly, because we don't see individual income tax payers. We're not sure if that was a one-time payment or if it was normal collections. So we can't account for the additional 12 million in corporate that was above the expected reduction due to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Just one.
Mr. Mariano.
Talking about for the month of April, for the corporate. To my knowledge, and based on our discussion with DOA, there was a non-recurring posting of 13.2 million for the month of April. Okay, so, but again, that's not part of the our baseline projection for the year.
All right.
But it is added in to the revenues for the year.
All right. Well, it's good to know your projections were very close. All right. Thank you. So, are there any other? Is there anything else that OFB would like to say? All right. Anyone else would like to say anything before we close the meeting? All right. I guess you'll be getting notice by the speaker as to the next meeting. He said June 21. But thank you very much. Thank you.